Kian had always been known as the quiet one, the guy who watched life unfold around him but rarely took the reins. Growing up in a bustling city, every corner seemed to shout opportunity, yet he often found himself retreating to the shadows of his own comfort. At school, he excelled just enough to get by but never reached the heights he secretly craved. He had dreams, a studio of his own where he could create music, mornings spent running trails before the sun rose, evenings poured into books that could shape his mind, but there was always a voice whispering excuses: too tired, too late, too hard. For years, Kian's life was a cycle of intention and procrastination. He would buy a notebook for goals and leave it untouched for weeks, enroll in classes only to skip the lectures, and promise himself that tomorrow, somehow, would be better. It was comfortable, and comfort had a way of disguising mediocrity as safety. But one evening, something inside him shifted. He was walking home from a late shift at a local cafe, his shoulders heavy with fatigue, when he passed a small, dimly lit gym. Through the window, he saw someone lifting weights with an intensity that radiated purpose, not just physical exertion but a quiet insistence on progress. The sight struck Kian, not because he wanted muscles, but because he recognized the embodiment of discipline, a person choosing growth over excuses every single day. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept replaying the image in his mind, wondering what would happen if he allowed himself to commit fully, not partially, not sometimes, but always. The next morning, Kian woke up at 5 a.m., something he hadn't done in years. He laced up his worn sneakers and ran through the city streets, breathing in the crisp air, feeling muscles tighten and awaken. The first run was brutal. His lungs burned, legs ached, and every fiber of his body screamed to quit. But instead of surrendering, he remembered that man in the gym and the silent lesson he carried: discipline is not born in comfort, it is forged in resistance. By the time the sun peeked over the horizon, Kian had completed his first run in months. It was nothing compared to what he dreamed of achieving, but it was a start. And the start was all that mattered. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Kian embraced routines that would have once felt suffocating. He woke early, meticulously planned his day, and held himself accountable for every action. At first, it was hard. Friends invited him to parties, tempting him back into old habits, and his body protested the physical strain of early morning runs and hours spent honing his craft. But Kian discovered a surprising truth: discomfort was temporary, and the pride of progress lasted longer. Every day he ticked off his goals, he felt a quiet satisfaction that eclipsed the fleeting pleasure of excuses. Kian's work life, too, transformed. At the cafe, he no longer allowed himself to coast. He observed the managers, the baristas who excelled, and learned from them, integrating efficiency, creativity, and patience into his own performance. He started taking online courses in business management and music production, dedicating evenings to mastering skills that had once seemed intimidating. The nights he spent coding beats or organizing playlists became sacred time, a ritual of creation rather than distraction. Slowly, the version of Kian who once hesitated to start anything began to emerge, focused, resilient, and fiercely accountable. But discipline wasn't without setbacks. One particularly rainy morning, Kian overslept and missed a planned trail run. The guilt gnawed at him, threatening to unravel the progress he had painstakingly built. He found himself at a crossroads: succumb to frustration, repeat old patterns, or accept imperfection and keep moving forward. With a deep breath, Kian chose the latter. He ran later that day, slower, drenched, yet unbroken in spirit. That run became a lesson etched into his core: discipline was not about perfection, it was about persistence. Growth was not linear, and setbacks were not failures but opportunities to reinforce his commitment. As months turned into a year, Kian's life transformed in subtle but profound ways. He no longer measured himself against others but against his own past self, evaluating every day for improvement. His music evolved, not because he chased recognition, but because he practiced relentlessly, experimenting, failing, and refining. Friends began to notice the change in him. He carried himself differently, not arrogantly, but with a quiet confidence, a sense of ownership over his time, energy, and decisions. His relationships deepened as well. Kian learned to show up not just physically but emotionally, bringing the same discipline to his interactions as he did to his goals. One afternoon, Kian returned to the small gym that had ignited his transformation. The man who had inspired him was there, older now, still lifting with relentless precision. Kian nodded, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. No words were needed, the gym itself was a testament to the discipline that had shaped both of them. Kian realized that the era he had stepped into, the discipline era, wasn't a temporary phase or a fleeting experiment. It was a lifetime commitment. He had chosen growth over excuses, and in doing so, had discovered a freedom he had never known, the freedom to shape his own destiny, day by day, choice by choice. Kian's journey wasn't over. There were new challenges ahead, demanding projects at work, creative blocks, personal setbacks, and moments of self-doubt. But he approached each challenge with the mindset of a person who knew the value of consistency. He journaled every night, reflecting on victories, failures, and lessons. He set ambitious goals but paired them with small, actionable steps, understanding that monumental achievements were the sum of countless deliberate actions. Kian had built more than habits, he had built character, and character carried him through storms that would have once broken him. By the time Kian turned 25, he had launched a small independent studio where he collaborated with local artists, blending technology, music, and creativity in ways that felt authentic to him. He had never won a traditional award or received widespread fame, but he had something far more valuable, mastery over himself. He no longer waited for the perfect moment, he created it. Every note he played, every track he produced, every sunrise he ran to was a testament to the life he had deliberately constructed. Kian understood now that discipline was not restrictive, it was liberating. The chains of excuses had been broken, and in their place was a framework that allowed his potential to flourish without hesitation. In quiet moments, Kian reflected on the man he once was, the hesitant, doubtful, excuse-prone version of himself, and smiled. The journey had not been glamorous or easy, but it had been real. Every early morning, every sleepless night, every small victory compounded into something far greater than he could have imagined. The discipline era wasn't about perfection, nor was it about fleeting triumphs. It was about choosing growth every single day, regardless of circumstance, and in doing so, crafting a life of resilience, purpose, and meaning. Kian had entered this era with uncertainty but walked through it with intentionality, knowing that each day was an opportunity to invest in himself, to rise above excuses, and to embrace the power of discipline as the truest form of freedom. By the end, Kian's story was no longer about the person who once hesitated in shadows. It was about a man who had learned the secret of life, that the smallest, consistent choices, made in moments when no one is watching, are the ones that define greatness. And as he looked out over the city from the rooftop of his studio, headphones on, pen in hand, and the sunrise painting the horizon, Kian knew the truth he had lived: growth was never given, it was earned. And in the discipline era, he had claimed it fully.